Hey, this is Ed Robertson, and this is the Mountain and Prairie podcast, where I introduce you to some of the innovative and creative individuals who are helping to shape the future of the American West. I meet most of these people through my work in ranch brokerage and land conservation, or through my hobbies and interests that revolve around spending time in the mountains. My guests include ranchers, writers, entrepreneurs, conservationists, athletes, artists, pretty much anyone who's doing important work and has an interesting story to tell. My guest today is Jason Schlarb. Jason is a champion ultra runner whose notable achievements include winning the Hard Rock 100 this past summer, winning the Run Rabbit Run 100 twice, and finishing as the top American in the 2014 UTMB. He's also an accomplished adventurer who, among other things, has skied the entire Hard Rock 100 course in the winter and explored remote regions of Patagonia and New Zealand, all while filming his exploits and creating engaging, authentic films through his company Schlarb Productions. Most impressively, Jason is a veteran who spent 10 years as an officer in the United States Air Force, which included a 5-month deployment to Iraq and his earning the rank of major. A competitive soccer player for most of his youth, Jason made the switch to running rather late in the game when he joined the cross-country team as a high school senior. But his natural talent for endurance, combined with a relentless competitive streak, allowed him to walk onto a Division I cross-country team, where he excelled throughout his college career. After years of focusing exclusively on road races ranging from 10K to marathon, he made the switch to trail running and has never looked back. Jason, his wife Maggie, and his son Felix have shaped their lives around the pursuit of a purpose-driven, rewarding, and adventurous life, and they currently reside on the southern end of Colorado's San Juan Mountains, just outside Durango. Jason is a fascinating guy with an infectious positive attitude, which made for a very fun and in-depth conversation. We covered a broad range of topics, including his athletic background, his journey to ultra running, and some of his adventures around the world. We discussed his time in the military and how those 10 years of service affected his outlook and approach to sport and life. We also chat about his thoughts on competition, mental toughness, the benefits of positive thinking, and a ton of other subjects. Whether you're an athlete or not, there's a huge amount of wisdom to be gleaned from Jason's experiences and perspective. I thought this was a great conversation, and I really appreciated Jason taking the time to chat. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. As I say, when you meet somebody for the first time and they ask you that question that people love to ask, what do? How do you answer that?
I say that I'm a professional athlete. That's the lion's share of what I do from day to day, and where I spend my energy, my mental focus, and then also paying the bills.
Yep.
So I'm a professional athlete first. I also do some work for Ultra, managing the elite team, kind of coordinating those guys and gals, and then also I have my video production company called Schlarb, where we do some film kind of stuff. Nice.
And I want to dig into all of those because I think they're all super interesting. But maybe we can just start with the running, since that's probably the most obvious thing. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what you're specializing in now and the types of races you're doing now, and just kind of your recent running resume? And then I'd love to hear more about your background.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, let's do it.
So I guess the most exciting thing, at least that I've seen in the last year, has been your victory at Hard Rock. And for people who don't understand Hard Rock, could you just talk a little bit about that race and your training and just kind of the experience you had there?
Okay. Hard Rock 100 is amongst the kind of small little niche of trail running and ultra running. Even it is the kind of granddaddy for high altitude, remote, wilderness, steep kind of ultra marathon trail mountain running.
Yep.
And that's exactly where I feel most inspired and excited. And the Hard Rock has been something it's an elusive. It's difficult to get into. There's a lottery involved. There's only 140 some spots for the entire race. It took me, I think, on the 5th year I got into the race. So I applied and applied and applied and applied, and then finally got in this last year for 2016 in the lottery, which is held in December. And yeah, that's the granddaddy of them. And, it has a reputation that's not just, in the San Juans or Colorado, even the U.S., worldwide mountain runners. This is one of the big, kind of holy grails of 100-mile mountain running. And with that kind of reputation, there's been a number of, international elite that have at least applied, and a handful of them that have gotten in, such as the one and only Kilian Jornet, and Seb from France, one of the icons of European mountain trail running, ultra running, has been here. Julien Choyer, another one from Europe. So the list is fairly impressive, despite the difficulties of getting into this race. And it's such an awesome race, and it's such an awesome place that we chose as a family 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, to move to Durango, which is about 50 miles, 80 kilometers away from the start, which is in Silverton.
Yeah, it's almost like your backyard, which is hard to believe because those mountains are just so spectacular. And for people who don't fully understand ultra running, because the people that listen to this, it's everybody from people that are involved in the land conservation world to, people like you that are athletes. And can you talk a little bit about the course and the vertical gain and loss and just how rugged it is? Because I think it's hard for people to truly understand how rugged that course really is.
Yeah, I'd love to. It's always easy to talk about hard rock.
Yeah.
Within the Rockies, I'll go macro on this. Within the Rockies, the San Juan Mountains are they're fairly remote. There's no interstate within hours of where I live and where Durango and Silverton is located. There's a handful of cities that the course runs through, little towns, let's call it. Silverton is the start and the finish, but it goes through Ouray, close to Lake City, and then also Telluride, which has a bit of a reputation, in the mountain and mountain-loving community and skiing community. Mm-hmm. And those mountains, I would describe them, a term that's thrown around every once in a while for the San Juans and the Ouray and Telluride areas, the Swiss Alps of America. Mm-hmm. And they're very steep, and there's a little bit more moisture that falls here, both summer and winter, spring and fall, than a lot of the rest of the Rockies, all the way up into into Montana. So they get a little bit more precipitation. The trees are a little bit bigger. There's beautiful lakes, lots of rivers and streams. And again, going back to that remoteness, there's not as many people as going, through the I-70 corridor through Denver, Fort Collins, into Vail and Aspen and in that area. So it's a really special kind of place. They're not a straight up line of mountains like, let's say, the Sangre de Cristos or the Bridgers of Montana or the Sawatch or Wasatch. Mm-hmm. They are really kind of almost like the Dolomites of Italy. They're like, there's a lot of valleys and different directions of ridges, and so it's just a really special, rugged, steep kind of place. And the stats of the race reflect that. It's 100 miles with 33,000 feet of climbing. Obviously, it's a loop. There's 33,000 feet of descent as well. The course starts at 9,000 feet, and the average elevation is 11,200 feet. The lowest point, it goes down into Ouray, just under 8,000. And the highest point is the 14,000 foot peak called Handy's, and that's as high as it gets in the contiguous U.S. Yeah. So pretty impressive statistics and background, and that's what makes that special, the race so special.
So for people who are in the endurance world, I think they all know the hard rock and they all understand the appeal, as weird as it is to want to go out there and push yourself that hard. But for folks that aren't in the ultra world, I think they'd love to kind of understand your mindset and your background and how you came to be the type of person who not only can do that, but you can do it and win it. And so where did you grow up, and what were your early athletic achievements like?
Going way back, I was born into a military family. My mom and dad were both enlisted in the Air Force, and we started, or they started, their kind of young lives traveling around, Italy, Phoenix, Texas, Colorado, and it wasn't too long after I was born that they got out, but they kind of continued that kind of lifestyle. They both are really, really big into traveling and in kind of adventure, and so they continue even after I moved out to move all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I would call Colorado home, though. I spent a good chunk of my kind of grade school kind of age in Colorado, and that made an impact on me that motivated my selection in going to Montana for undergraduate. But backing up to motivations as far as competition and athleticism, I kind of had a father that was very competitive, and he was my soccer coach. I grew up as a soccer player,
Mm-hmm.
and those kind of values or those kind of traits of being really kind of pushing myself and wanting to win, both good and bad, kind of set root back then. And that has made an impact on me to this day. But like I said, did soccer, went to private schools to play on state champions. Soccer
Where were you in Colorado?
programs. I was in Aurora,
Okay,
in the
yeah.
suburbs. Not a beautiful place, but you were close enough that you could do weekend trips into the mountains. And I went to Regis High School, which was and still continues to be, one of those schools that gets all the rich kids and kind of win state championships, and that's what I was. And my parents were wanting for me, and kind of burned out on soccer,
Uh-huh.
and walked on to a cross country team right at the end of high school, and because my friends were some of my friends had gone to that path as well, and didn't love running. Did not love running at all.
That's quite a transition. You generally don't see those much overlap between, a team sport like soccer. And it seems like they're almost two far ends of the spectrum. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was the camaraderie and fun after and before and traveling. And then the other factor was that I was really good at it.
How long did it take you to know you were gifted?
In soccer, I was a midfielder, halfback. I was the guy that could run around the whole game at a fast pace, and I would always excel at any kind of running aspect or endurance aspect, and that was always a known for me.
Got it. And so this is a little bit off subject, but thinking about your running career now. And, a lot of what you do is solo. I mean, a lot of your training, I would imagine, is completely by yourself. A lot of your races, you're completely by yourself. So how do you balance that competitive drive you have to beat other people with the competitive drive to just push yourself? Because again, it seems like two different ends of the spectrum, wanting to beat other people and then wanting to push yourself as hard as you can. How do you balance those two?
It's a really difficult balance. In the elite, endurance athletes, one of the biggest enemies to oneself is doing too much,
Mm-hmm.
and figuring that out. I was lucky enough to go on from that, year in high school of running cross country to walking on to a Division I team. At Montana State University, and having coaching, and being able to, both through failure and success, see how pushing oneself can be good and bad,
Mm-hmm.
and balance that, and understanding the recovery rest cycle and just kind of the physiological kind of background behind endurance athletics, and that background enables me to have a lot of the success that I have in the ultra trail, kind of completely by yourself out in the mountains or on the trails,
Yeah.
kind of sport.
So you went to Montana State. You said you walked on. Did you walk on freshman year?
Yeah, I walked on. I hope my coach doesn't hear this, but he wasn't very cool. He told me to go away. He's like, you
That's where
know
the
what?
competitive drive comes in.
Absolutely. The guy, I didn't have I didn't have much experience, in high school at all with running, almost nothing. And then went to like, I did a visit. I drove through and I said, "Hey, here I am. I want to run." And he basically said, "Don't come out. We've got a team that's, a really competitive, D1 program, and this probably just it wouldn't work out for you." And me and another buddy that was in a similar situation said, no, and came out, and he was actually kind of upset that I was there, and he almost told me to go home and said, "Okay, fine, you can work out." And it was basically a day-to-day kind of like uh, prove yourself kind of thing. And, I stayed with the team on a tempo run. So it was like, okay, you can make it through the rest of this week. And then, and then after that, he said, okay, you can stick around and do the time trial. And then lo and behold, I made the travel team my freshman year. So
That's
that
awesome.
was, yeah, it wasn't intentional by the coach, or at least not fully. But yeah, that was a drive and a factor, and then there's obviously some talent there too. But
Was he
yeah,
the coach all 4 years?
yeah, all 5 years I did 5 years, and he still is the coach.
Do you keep in touch with him at all?
A little bit, yeah, and he's a good friend. He really cares about his athletes, but he's just a unique guy. He's just a really unique guy. That you can love him and hate him at the same time, kind of coach.
I'm reading a book right now about Nike. It's Phil Knight, the guy who started Nike's memoir, and he talks about his cross country experience with the University of Oregon coach, and he sounded fairly similar as far as just a kind of gruff, prove yourself every day kind of thing. So maybe I think there's something to that. I think if you got the right personality, it instills it makes you tougher than you would have been otherwise. It'd probably make me run away.
Yeah, yeah. It's partly just him trying to be tough, but also partly the guy has a really super soft heart,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't want to have to tell people to go away or have them have to witness and be their coach when it doesn't work out. And so he kind of like filters himself. But anyways, getting off on a tangent, but that definitely was the case, and that was an impact on me, as an athlete, and made me excel.
So 5 years at Montana State, and then what was the next step?
The next step was commissioning into the Air Force. I went through an ROTC program at Montana State, and right away went to Boston and found out about two different things. That the Air Force, the military, has sports teams for within different commands within the Air Force, and then all Air Force, and then one step further, all military teams. And so I competed in track and cross country, nothing longer than I think maybe 12K. But that's what I did, and then also got into BAA, which is Boston Athletic Association. They have a club, and I ran with them as well, with another roommate of mine that was a collegiate runner. So that was the next step. It was kind of like a 65% focus. I was working a lot, and also being a single dude and with other interests. And
Yeah.
I kind of got into the road thing there. Could have done a lot better though.
Were you intending to have a career in the military, or were you thinking you would do it for a few years and then move on to something else, or What was the thinking there with the Air Force?
Well, I entered the Air Force because I had a roommate in college that was in it, and he told me, "Hey, you just go sign up, and you get decent grades, and you can be a pilot."
Mm-hmm.
And as a little dude, also influenced with my parents and grandparents, a jet fighter pilot was I think the correct term for what I wanted to be as a kid. So all of a sudden that kind of got rekindled. Went through the program, checked the boxes, but my hearing disqualified me, and so all
Oh,
of a sudden
really?
yeah. So like my junior year, something like that, I basically got told it's not going to happen because of the hearing. And yeah, so from there I went and I was like, okay, I'm going to do a 4 year and out kind of thing, and I'm going to be a businessman for the Air Force. That's the most the easiest transition from military to the civilian life for kind of the resume kind of stuff, but. Anyways, I stayed much longer. Ended up being 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Went from Boston to Colorado Springs. Worked a bit in Los Angeles, and worked on a whole bunch of different weapon systems, space, concept development, lots of neat stuff. Did a deployment to Iraq for 5 months. A lot of amazing experiences.
Sure.
I call them good or bad,
Yeah.
but amazing experiences, and decided after an ROTC assignment at University of Colorado in Boulder that it was time to focus on the family and then also be able to choose where I want to live. I had to do that deployment 3 months after my son was born, which was
Oh,
really
wow.
tough.
Holy, I can't
And
imagine that, man.
yeah, that was really tough. A lot of military guys do way more tough things, but I did my service, proud of it, and
Yeah, you should be proud of it. That's awesome. I've got my both my grandfather's World War II dog tags up above my desk, and I look at them. I think that's about the most noble thing anybody can do. So anyway, in the spirit of Veterans Day, thanks for your service.
thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah. So then, when you got out so you got out of the military after 10 years, and at that point, were you completely focused on making a go of it as a pro athlete?
No, not at all. I had dabbled in ultra. I had done a race or two. Um,
And up to this
um,
point, you've been doing 10Ks, half marathons, all on the road. Is that correct?
yes, that is correct.
Okay.
And I was like a high 14s 5K guy. 109, 110 half, and 220 mid for marathon. So I mean, I could get some free shoes and be in a club or whatever. But unfortunately, I was young and a little bit immature. I loved trail running. I loved mountain running. My easy runs, my long runs, every chance I got, I was off the road and in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
But being a bit young and uh, I just not having my priorities where I think they should have been for running, I felt that the ultra community, the trail running community, was just a whole bunch of old guys that they were kind of weirdos, freaks, and they weren't really runners,
Mm-hmm.
and that it was kind of just a whole bunch of people out there having fun and being crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I loved that craziness. I loved that, but I felt that the level of competition wasn't there, and I wanted to, selfishly, I wanted to be fast and be the best and compete against the best and see how, see if I can get Olympic trials qualifier, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And then, luckily, and I'm not exactly proud of this, but, North Face popped up, $10,000
Mm-hmm.
for first and, more for second and third and stuff. But that came onto the radar, and I was like, okay, I'm in. And I have not run a road race since.
And what year was that?
I think that was 2011.
Got it. And so at that point, you knew you were in, and you were going to make a go of it. And so that was a 50 miler. And then when was your first 100 miler?
My first 100 miler, I think, was in 13. So a few years later, I kind of took it easy because, I mean, honestly, when I did that 50 mile, I was just like, this would be really fun. This would be cool. It is competitive, but I wasn't like, hey, I'm going to take this by storm and be the best.
And
You
how did
know,
you do? Did you win that 50 miler?
no, not at all.
Okay.
Dave Mackey, Dakota Jones. I think maybe I don't know if it was the year of Mike Wolf and those guys, but anyways, it is and was the race that it is.
If you can
But
remember, if you can remember, what was the biggest surprise that you had during that race? Compared to all the road running you've been doing, when you got out there and say you get to mile 35, what was there anything that sticks out in your mind that was surprising about the whole experience?
well, it was the surprising thing, a good thing about it was that one of the good things about it was that I was good at it. That I was in it to just kind of maybe be top 10. I remember Mike Warding was there, be able to compete with some of those guys that I mentioned and just not die, like, I mean, it was a complete completion kind of thing. I hadn't raced longer than a marathon.
Mm-hmm.
And I also was surprised by how much fun it was. I was comfortable for that first half. I was pushing a bit, but it was comfortable. And that it wasn't it was about traveling through the mountains and the trails and the wilderness, and that was absolutely blown away about how awesome it was. And like I said, I haven't gone back to the road. Not that I wouldn't do a 10K or something like that, but that's where I focus. That's what I love now.
So, are there any, when you look back at your military career, are there any, I guess, habits or disciplines that you got from being in the military that you think carry over into your athletic career? As far as being disciplined or being methodical, do you credit much of that military mindset with any of your success training?
I think all of my attributes, for the most part, were there before I got into the military, but
Mm-hmm.
I think a little bit more discipline and organization, kind of, was developed. And I think one of the biggest things that I enjoyed and got out of the military was the camaraderie and working with other people and together. Not that that's applicable at all to my career now, but those are the kind of values and things that kind of set in. And then, appreciation for our freedom and our country. But I think the ability to endure some tough situations came about from being in Iraq for 5 months in a place that, was 120 during the day, 130, and then, lows that were, as hot as 90 something, and training there, surviving there, and working, 70-hour weeks, 12-hour days, that kind of thing every day. That definitely, that definitely helped build some, like, excuse my language, but tough as shit
Oh
kind
yeah.
of, you know,
I mean, that's
modalities.
this perspective, and that's one of the reasons that I like endurance sports is because I think, well, if I can do this, everything else seems relatively easy. And going to Iraq it makes running 100 miles seem easy. Seem easy. It's like it's 10 levels up from anything anybody could do here in the United States. I mean, that's just I can't even pretend to get my head around being over there, especially being a new father. That's hard for me to understand, but it's awesome.
And the people that what kind of sacrifices they are making, and the challenges that they go through while they're in Iraq, and seeing people die, and just being, it's insult to injury a little bit. You're in a really horrible, difficult place to be. Both Afghanistan and Iraq. Our last conflicts. Just that builds some. That's a tough place, but it also builds some amazing people. through those experiences.
Definitely. Everybody, I've got a lot of pretty close friends who have spent time in Iraq and Afghanistan, and all of them say similar things, that it's the hardest thing they ever had to do, but also, when all the chips are down, it's one of the best things as far as just, making you have a perspective on things and toughen you up. And again, thank you for doing that for our country. The way I initially came across you was, I was training for the Run Rabbit Run 100, and I was watching some interviews, and I saw your interview with I Run Far after you had won the Run Rabbit Run. And I remember you were just sitting there and you were talking about, kind of the mental aspects of running 100. And one of your techniques that you would do is to force yourself to smile. And you said you would literally talk to yourself out there on the trail, all positive self-talk. And I remember I thought that was the coolest thing, because personally, when I was, training for these deals, my old technique used to be almost to get mad at myself or just think I need to be tougher, hurry up, you're going too slow. And I adopted your method soon before that race and did it through the race. And it's not like I set any records or anything, but I just had a great time, and it was a positive experience. And my wife even commented that I was smiling every time I came into the aid stations. And so I love that. And so I'd love to hear more about that. I'd love for you to tell people that are listening to this about that technique. And then I'd also like to know, have you always been that way, or was there a change that made you go that way?
Yeah, this is, I would say this is probably one of the biggest secrets to really long endurance athletics. But it's applicable to everything, from getting through a tough meeting to a workout to relationship. It's a real, it's something that people can kind of understand, or it makes sense, it checks out. But when you really, use it, it's super powerful.
It is.
It really is super powerful. And some of those techniques of actually moving the facial structure, your muscles into a smile. I don't know the science behind it, but it releases some stimulants into your body and your brain that you can't be, it just helps your clarity of purpose and your ability to do what you're doing. And then the same thing with that laughing. And then the third kind of leg of that is that talk, getting the nasty, the negative out and putting in the positive, and putting in the right kind of positive. And those are tools. Run Rabbit Run was really the kind of breakout for me, as far as both a performance and then also being able to use these tools, and then my ability to excel, and in my opinion, do better than I think my talent or background might dictate, is because of this. And, I've got my mantras. I say these things like, for me, the stress of other people around me or expectations or my goals can kind of ruin and rule a race, and put doubt and negative into, both when you're actually accomplishing it. I'm stressed that, I've got to do this. I've got to do this. I've got to be here. Or, if you're falling behind or something, or you're competing with somebody else and you start to talk or you start to doubt, what you can do. But instead to say, I don't care about anybody else in this race but me. I'm focusing exactly on me. I'm having a good time. All of these kind of like aspects can really just change your outlook and change how you feel in a race, and then therefore your ability to go faster or continue at a fast pace is affected. And it is amazing tool.
When you were a 16-year-old soccer player, ultra competitive soccer player, did you have that mindset, or
No.
was there more kind of classic testosterone? So when did you change?
I changed at Run Rabbit Run, the year that I won.
Oh, really?
That was the first time that I had used that. That was the first time that I had believed in that. And, that was the first time I did the laughing or the smiling thing. And, yeah, I mean, I used to just grunt through. I used to be like, I want to win. I'm going to get through
Yeah,
this,
grit your teeth.
exactly, exactly. And then, just have epic stress,
Hmm.
in the race, and just be dwelling on that. And boy, it was a revelation and a magic thing to get away from. Like, I can back up just 1 year from that year that I set the course record and had the best race still to my life, even compared to that Hard Rock finish this year.
Hmm.
That race was extra magic. That was yeah. Anyways, the year before, I was in similar shape, not quite as good, but I went into that as my first 100, and I didn't have these tools. And 30 miles in, I was walking in second place,
Hmm.
and just absolutely down and out, and said, "This is impossible. This is terrible. Why would anybody run this 100-mile thing?" And I was such a blow up that I had not taken my headlamp because I didn't see this coming, and it was dark, and I had to run with Dylan Bowman, who's one of the best 100-milers in the world. This is kind of early when we were both getting our start at these races, and I had to run with him. And I asked him, like, "Is it always like this?" Because he'd done a few hundreds before. Are you feeling this way? And he's like, "No, it's tough. Yeah, this happens." But I ran with him. I had to run with him because I couldn't see, and I had all intentions of dropping at the very next aid station. And I said, "Are you going to drop? This is just horrible." And he's like, I couldn't believe that he said no. And, even though we all both intended to get in this race, I still feel sorry for him having to deal with me. And his positive, just keep on going, all of a sudden turned that around, that absolute abyss of self-pity. And, I passed him and got my headlamp, got into, right behind first place, and proceeded to make a wrong turn for 7 miles. That crushed me. I got to ride back.
Oh man, I cannot imagine that.
Yeah, and I got back on the course, and I just mentally got crushed. I was back into like 10th place or something like that.
Well, that race,
it's
107 miles anyway. They say 102 or 103. I mean, I've read that it could be as long as 107. So you went a good 114 that day.
Yeah. But my point is that I just didn't have those tools, and I ended up quitting and feeling sorry for myself, just like I did earlier in the race.
Oh yeah.
The potential's there, the fitness is there, but if you don't have that sound mind and positive aspect, and to some degree, you're going to fail. And that's the beauty or the kind of mystique of the 100.
I agree completely. And that smiling thing, like you said at the beginning, I apply it to other parts of my life as well. Because really in the end, the only thing in your control is your attitude. And I've found it to be a very positive thing. So thank you for that. I've seen on some of your social media posting and maybe on your blog that your wife does some work in holistic body work and holistic healing. And I was wondering if she's had any influence on your mental outlook as well, because it seems like some of these techniques you use very well could be from her and some of her work. Has she helped you with that at all?
She has. We've kind of almost grown together with this. She has fed me a lot of these tactics and methods, along with another friend of mine, Tony Pritchard.
Mm-hmm.
And she works with a lot of she's kind of like a life coach, and she also does just embetterment kind of self-help. I hate to use that term, but that's kind of what she's into. She does some stuff called access consciousness, and she has been a huge asset in a lot of those those mind, energy, positive attitude, getting the negative out, bringing in the positive, and unleashing potential and making impossibilities possible. So she's amazing. She's cool. I'm lucky to have her as a partner to be able to use those skills and tools. And man, it's priceless.
And I know you do some coaching as well. And so is that something that you coach? I mean, obviously you put together the actual training plans, but have you figured out a pretty effective way, or you and your wife together figured out a pretty effective way to coach people in this kind of positive thinking?
Absolutely. That is a big part of that, pre-race, talking about doing some mantras, talk about, where the weaknesses and strengths are, and, knowing what you're going to say and do and react. That's really neat. It's really fun. And I would put the correlation or the analogy back to being, in Iraq, to running a 100-miler. You are absolutely living. And I think that that's in our time and era when we don't have it that tough at all.
Mm-hmm.
Being in a place where you are pushing yourself, where you are doing something incredible, where you are really living, that is just priceless. And you have to have tools, and they're kind of already in there because of just because of our amazing ability as a human to do what we've done, and continue to do. It's in there. It's just understanding and unleashing it and unlocking it and putting it in the right direction and kind of getting out of this comfort zone that we're so used to and really doing amazing things. And so those tools are really important because of the kind of posh life I think we live in. So we're not as tough as we used to be, I think. And so I think that that's one of the big draws and appeals to all these crazy, tough mudders or ultra endurance athlete, Ironman, climbing peaks, when we don't have to at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's just because it's in us, and to really live and push our physical and mental capacities. Again, a little bit of a tangent, but that's kind of a little bit of the story of me and what I like and what I why I gravitate to this kind of stuff. Because, even back in college, I didn't run the 10K or 5K because it was too long, but I've learned and discovered some neat stuff about myself and about my body that puts me into a category that I never, ever, ever would have imagined even 8 years ago.
That's so awesome. And I don't think it's a tangent at all. I mean, that's the exact reason I have this podcast and want to have these conversations, because there's so many people doing all this cool stuff throughout the West, and they've all got such a unique story. And I just love hearing it. And luckily other people do too. So, speaking of these kind of crazy adventures, I'd love to hear a little bit, or I'm sure the listeners would also love to hear about these trips that you do, kind of annual trips. I know you've made films about all of them. You've gone to New Zealand, you've gone to Patagonia. Most recently, you skied the Hard Rock course. And by the way, that video is awesome. I loved it. And I'll have links to everything on the webpage, including your Run Rabbit Run interview and the links to all your videos or your films. So could you just talk a little bit about kind of what drives you to go on these annual adventure trips?
Yeah, you bet. I would say that it was almost totally inspired by me wanting to explore the world with my closest and best friends, and to be able to make it a feasible, journey each year. And by making this film, it kind of enabled us to do that. But also, secondly, it enabled us to be able to relive that. I think that is really, really special. To kind of capture that. So I can show, my 5-year-old Felix, come back from these trips. Where were you? Okay, here's a picture. That doesn't quite tell it like a good film does. And, when I'm old and slowing down, it's cool to look back and see this. But the experience itself is pretty special. And the thing that I like that is unique, I think, about the brand is Schlarb Wolf, and the brand name comes from my last name and my buddy's last name. The unique thing is going with other people to do something really, really cool, because This isn't driven by a sponsor. This
Hmm.
isn't North Face saying we want to send this story to our our consumers or our potential market. This is truly, a collaboration of a handful of sponsors that I say, hey, we're going to go do something really amazing and cool, and they jump on. They don't dictate the shoe shot angles or anything like that.
Sure.
It's about going out and exploring somewhere amazing. We're doing something as amazing as we can possibly do, and going and doing it with really, really good friends, not just a fellow athlete that happens to be able to do it. So that's the thing that I love about it, and continue to kind of try to make this happen. And yeah, sending FKTs, spending time in the South Island of New Zealand. Um, it's been fantastic, and the kind of cool thing too about it, um, flipping the coin, is that it's so much more memorable for a consumer or for somebody watching than just a time and space where I go and I podium. I do well at a race.
Hmm.
The next year, who was second or third at Western or Hard Rock. People forget, but like a story like this really tells more about what the experience is, what the place is like, and also can help a brand say, hey, we're into this kind of storytelling, we're into this kind of lifestyle, and then therefore it becomes a kind of a potentially sustainable or slightly lucrative operation. I'm not paying the bills by Schlarb Wolf yet, at least, but that's kind of the whole spectrum of what we are doing with it.
Yeah, well, I think the videos are they're really authentic, and what you're talking about kind of getting the opportunity to go out with good friends and explore these places, it really comes through. And I think in the era of all these kind of overproduced action type adventure films, they're more like some kind of Hollywood movie than a real adventure. I think yours is the perfect mix of true hardcore adventure with the authentic side of it that comes through. So, how do you do the editing on that, or do you have some partners that do that? Because it's really good.
No, I'm not the guy that's good with the camera nor the editing.
Yeah,
I we do I am involved, and Wolf has been involved too, with the storyboarding
sure.
and putting that together and collaborating with the film guy that we work with. We worked with Joel Wolpert for 2 years, and then Noah this year. Another guy named Bobby Yarig who lives in Montana that does a lot of stuff for Montana films. But yeah, it's a cool process, and it's a unique process in that we're not. It's not an ultra film. It's not a North Face film.
Hmm.
So it's kind of neat, and it's a little bit more grassroots.
Yes.
And so it's fun. It's cool, and we do our best. And we're going to try to continue to do our best of telling really interesting stories. We want to go down to um, Quechua speaking part of the world in Peru or Colombia, and go and visit a mountain village and go with somebody that can speak the language and translate and kind of find out about these people and what they're all about, and what development has done to their way of life and what they see as their future, and talk about their past. So kind of I'm really excited about that, but that's kind of the next chapter, and trying to make that project work.
Awesome. Well, I'll look forward to that. One more question, kind of along the line of adventures, is I do a lot of work in land conservation, and I think a lot of people listening to this are involved or have a interest in conservation in one way or the other. And one of the interesting things I've found from talking to people is everybody seems to have a different definition of what conservation means. And you obviously have spent a ton of time in wild places and have a deep respect for the land and for wilderness. And so I was wondering, if you had to define the word conservation, how would you do that?
Yeah, that's
It's tough. It's my
yeah,
job,
that,
and I
that's
don't know how to do it.
yeah. I mean, there's just so many different aspects that we could focus on. But well, the first thing that comes to mind, and this is selfish and a little bit maybe narrow, but keeping wild places wild,
Hmm.
and the value of that. And in my travels, seeing what happens when those kind of places aren't set aside. Um, even here in the U.S., you go east, and you see that there aren't places to go out there and just kind of go out. Even in Texas, when I visited down there, there's not a lot of what we have in Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas, etc., of those kind of BLM national forest, those kind of places where you can just go out and not have to worry about crossing private land all the
Hmm.
time, and be able to do a self human propelled kind of adventure. It's not available, and yeah, and preserving that, that's tough. And the other analogy too, in conservation, one of my favorite places in the world to run is in the Alps and the Dolomites, and I love the infrastructure that they have out there.
Hmm.
But after you know, I've spent 2 years, 2 summers in the last three, where I've spent 3 months 3 years ago, a month last year, and then 2 months this year in those places in the Alps, in the Dolomites of Italy. And I love being able to have all the access, but after a while, I really miss the Wild West,
Hmm.
the wilderness. In every valley, there are there are little towns. In almost every valley, even in the Alps and the Dolomites, there's ski trams and lodges and cable cars, and you can't get to a place very easily, at least, where you can just look out and just see wild,
Yeah.
and when I get some of my European Solomon Hoka friends or whatever that come over for the rut or different races, and they just get out, and maybe it's not as steep, maybe it isn't as dramatic, or there's not huge glaciers, but they just smile at the fact that they can look out and not see development and commercialization. And I think it's a balance, because I think infrastructure from being able to go out and experience it is important, but also not overdoing it and making it so that there aren't those wild places. So that's tough. That's tough to do. And I don't know if I defined what I think conservation is, but I think I've, in my little niche of what I love to do as far as my profession, managing that balance of access, but make preserving wild places. I think that's really important to me in the future.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think in the end, balance is the answer, and it's not the easy answer. The easy answer would just be go hardcore on one end of the spectrum or the other. But the reality is it's complicated, and the answer is somewhere in the middle. So,
Yeah.
well, I want to be respectful of your time, but I've got a few quick questions that I've been asking everybody that I've interviewed, and I've gotten some pretty interesting and diverse answers. So I'd love to hear yours. If Do you have any favorite books related to the West, or really any subject, any books that stand out in your mind as being a favorite that you'd recommend to friends?
Um, yeah, yeah. What's the name has just slipped my mind, but it's the book about blowing up the dam. What's it? It's something gang
Oh yeah,
about
the Monkey Wrench Gang.
Monkey Wrench Gang. Yeah, that's a pretty crazy a neat book. I quite enjoyed that, and a lot of the things that you get out of that one.
Yeah,
Um,
that is a good one. That guy's an interesting guy, Edward Abbey. He's a wild man, or was a wild man.
yeah, yeah. That
Yeah,
that's a good one. I also, I mean, I think everybody knows the story about um I'm sorry, I'm really bad with names,
no.
but I know you'll know this one too. But uh the story about the guy that goes out into Alaska
Oh
and
yeah, Into the Wild.
into the wild. Yeah, I think that is it's a little bit over the top in some ways, but um I think it's good talking about wanting to get out there and escape and what um, what modern society has kind of imbalance, has done to individuals and how it drives them into, into to kind of doing and getting escaping and stuff. And, I think that was a good book for me, at least.
Oh yeah, that's a great. Everything Krakauer writes is really interesting, and they're all the kind of books that I catch myself thinking about them months or years later. That's a great one. Do you have any favorite documentaries or films other than your own?
Um, Documentaries or films about just
Just
conservation.
anything that sticks out in your mind. Like for me, I always think about that one called 180 South. I don't know if you've seen that. It was made by, I think Patagonia paid for it, but these guys follow Yvon Chouinard's footsteps as he, on a road trip, kind of surfing and climbing road trip from California all the way down to Tierra del Fuego. And I've always thought that was just kind of a cool adventure documentary. I don't know if you have any that stick out. If not, no big deal. It's probably good if you're not watching TV all day.
Yeah. I don't have TV at home, but we do look at some Netflix stuff. But I try to watch the films that are from a lot of the guys that I work with, and Conrad Anker
Mm-hmm.
and Jimmy Chin. What's it called? Maru or
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
yeah, that was amazing. And it is going back, Touching the Void or Into Thin Air. Those books, some of them had been made into movies. Some it kind of didn't do a good job, but those are neat for me because just the human spirit and getting pushed and what we can do and that kind of really living kind of theme, that those both fit into that category.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about Touching the Void. That, I was in South America years and years ago and I met the guy, and I can't remember his name, but the guy who cut the rope in that book. Remember?
Wow.
Yeah, he was, and he was really, he was a really cool guy. And I kind of felt bad because I think everybody knows him just as I described him, as the guy who cut the rope, but who knows what anybody would have done in that situation.
Absolutely. The last one I would say, I don't want to come across as some rebel or that you need to just go run off into the wilderness but I mean, it really, a lot of the things that pop into my mind and part of the reason I live the life that I do now, after doing 10 years as an officer, making major, having an MBA, to now, being kind of a dirtbag and just paying the bills. It's kind of a product of being from the suburbs, and I just it just wasn't right for me, and it didn't
Mm-hmm.
feel good. And I just couldn't do that cubicle thing, and the book that kind of I think of, Fight Club.
Oh yeah.
Or in the financial institution, and how the system and those guys kind of just really living and beating the hell out of each other, and living in that kind of house that was just decrepit and crazy, but they were really living and being wild and ridiculous. And I don't support anarchy or complete craziness like that, but it's no mistake that is really satisfying for me to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just way too extreme. A lot of those examples that I just gave of some of those books and stuff, but involving that back into it. And I'm a really intense person, and I'm also a person that really appreciates wilderness. And I think I'm a product of coming from Cherry Creek school districts in Aurora, Colorado suburbs, and I just had to leave.
Well, it's awesome that you had the self-awareness to know that, because I think a lot of people have that desire, but they think, well, that isn't what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to, buy a big house and sit in the cubicle and make however much money. But they always know deep down that they should be doing more. And, I mean, I've got an MBA as well. And when I was in business school, I saw so many people that just were following this path and thinking they needed to be, the cubicle jockey and do this and that. And, I hope they're all happy, but I'm with you that I think there's a deep desire down in people to go out and push yourself and have adventures. Not that I have it all figured out, but I agree with you.
No, and I want to, touch on, there are people that are doing absolutely amazing things and changing lives and really living
Yes.
in the business world, in the political realm, in the, nonprofits, et cetera. And I completely, I think that is really living. But I also feel that some people, have a different calling or a different place. And then, I think that there's to some degree a little bit of everybody that needs that wild places and nature and things like that. And, I don't like people that are, make it almost like a religion. Like if you work in a cube, you are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely don't agree with that. And some people are, have excellent lives with, weekend warriors, etc. But anyways, that's where I lie on the subject.
No, that seems reasonable to me. I agree. It's just, being true to yourself, knowing what you want and having the guts to pursue it. And I think you're a perfect example of that. And I think a lot of the people I talk to, they're not professional athletes, but some of these folks that are, working in the land conservation world, they could be, an attorney at some big firm making $1 million a year, but they're passionate about land conservation, and that's what they were put on this earth to do, and they're pursuing it as hard as they can. And it's the same thing you're doing. You're doing in athletics, and that's the whole point of this podcast, is talking to people like you who are passionate about what they do. I love it. I think it's inspiring to me. One more kind of quick question for you. What is the craziest thing that has ever happened to you in the outdoors? I bet you've had a lot of crazy things happen, but is there one particular thing that stands out in your mind?
Oh, wow. The craziest thing.
It can be funny, scary. I mean, your Iraq thing, that could just be it, just 5 months in Iraq. But is there any like a bear ever chase you or anything? Somebody told a story about a bear chasing them one time.
Yeah. I think, for me, some of the craziest things that have happened have been things of just like overcoming and seeing that happen. I remember one of the quick stories. One of my inspirations to continue in the 100 miles after dropping that first Run Rabbit Run was a friend of mine named Bassett. And he lives in Telluride or whatever. It doesn't matter. But he basically got diagnosed with some kind of health issue right before the 100 mile, and he had to take blood thinners. He also was not in shape like he is now,
Mm-hmm.
and he basically started this 100-mile race, and that I started as well, and ended up dropping because I was pouting. This guy pretty much walked the entire 100 miles. And, after I had dropped out, in the top 10, after being in second place and probably would have won if I didn't make the wrong turn, et cetera, over at halfway done.
Yeah.
I went home, pouted, went to sleep, got up, was drinking some beers. And in that next afternoon, that guy, Bassett, was walking. And he was walking around, and he finished that race in, like 50 some hours. They extended the cutoffs. Or
That's
something
awesome.
like that. And that, even to think about it now, it makes me emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, this guy is just doing something that is absolutely amazing and crazy. And those kind of just pushing the body that way and doing something like that, that just blows me away. Most of these people are, running or moving, 2-3 times as long as I am, through a race. And, the same, I went over to Reunion Island and east of Madagascar and saw a race, a 100-miler, where they had a division where they carried people with disabilities.
Wow.
It wasn't the whole 100 miles, but it was a big chunk of it. And this is one of the most difficult races, right up there with Hard Rock.
Mm-hmm.
And, they start early, and then the rest of the 2,000 people in this race follow behind. They have, there's over 30,000 people at the start. it's a Creole African French community.
Wow.
The energy there, but anyways, my point is that these guys are carrying these people on these kind of almost like a cot on their shoulders with 4 or 5 guys or gals and carrying one dude on there. And man, when I see that, it makes me cry.
Sure.
And, to see people doing that for that individual and the joy that person is experiencing, being able to be out in a place like that and have, the people that love him or her carry them through someplace like that. Those are the most, some of the most powerful ones that come to mind right away for me, at least.
Yeah, that's a great one. That I've never heard of that race where they do that. That's really, I'm gonna look that up. That sounds really interesting.
It's Diagonal de Fou Grand Raid.
Okay, I'll put a link to it.
Yeah, you should check that out. That's something special.
So next to the last question, if you could make a request of the people who are listening to this podcast, and again, it basically people who have a love for the American West, even if they don't live here, just people that love the lifestyle, love the landscapes. Is there anything you'd like to ask of people listening?
I would request that, giving back, making sure that, you're not always just taking, you're not always just enjoying those benefits of wild places. It's tough as being a professional athlete. I don't have a lot of money to donate,
Mm-hmm.
but time is there, and going out and doing some trail maintenance, supporting the cause, signing some petitions and finding ways, or even just making sure that maybe you're an enabler to other people to be able to go out and do experience a wild place. I think that whether it's your kids or maybe underprivileged low income kind of people, there's programs all over the place, and making sure that we don't just get so caught up in making money, being the weekend warrior and doing amazing things, and experiencing amazing things, but make sure to give back. And then the last part too is to support brands that make that part of their corporate culture,
Mm-hmm.
that just not take. And then the last part too is athletes. There are athletes that do a better job at that, and honestly, Patagonia athletes are absolutely amazing at doing that. It's a requirement for being an ambassador for those guys. And but yeah, there are a lot of athletes out there that do stuff like that, and somehow supporting them as far as followership or saying good things. I think that's important to encourage those superheroes.
Those are all great. So how can people connect with you online? I know you've got a website and you've got some really awesome social media with Instagram. What's the best way for people to find you?
Instagram's my favorite. The cat videos and stuff about Donald Trump on Facebook, and just overwhelming for me.
It is, man. It's brain pollution.
Yeah, so I try to stay off of there, and Instagram's a little bit, for me at least, it's a little bit less like that. So I try to share my experiences and my heart from time to time on there, and that's where I love to connect with people, and if somebody wanted to do it with me, that's my favorite.
Great. Well, I'll have links to all that. Well, I really, really appreciate all your time. This was an awesome conversation, and I'll hopefully see you at a race at some point in the future.
I hope so. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and thanks for listening to that particular episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you go, I've got 3 quick things. Number 1, if you like the podcast, please do me a huge favor. Either pass it along to a friend who may be interested, share it on your social media, or go to iTunes and give it a 5-star review. All those things would mean a lot to me, and they would really help to spread the word about the podcast. Number 2, if you've listened to many of these episodes, you know that I love reading and I love talking about books. Every other month, I send out a quick email with a few books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The subjects are varied, but they're pretty much all nonfiction with an emphasis on history, biographies, adventure narratives, and topics related to the American West. There are no sales pitches for ranches, no spam, no other kind of nonsense, just books. So if you'd like to sign up for the list, head to Mountain and Prairie/reading, or just go to Mountain and Prairie and there's a massive tab at the top that says book recommendations. Click on it. There are a ton of good books that I've read. Some of the old email lists are on there. You can go crazy. There are a lot of books. And finally, if you know anyone I should interview for the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. All my contact info is at mountainandprairie.com, and I'm on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to have some recommendations and suggestions of interesting people I should meet. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.